like an onion. Elderberry tree. Isn't that awesome? Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. The garden is doing a lot of things. So last week we harvested some garlic and some cabbage. I have a little bit more harvesting to do today, some cabbage, but this week it's elephant garlic, which very cool thing has transpired. Ooh, that's weird. It's floral, garlicky, and a little bit spicy. This is actually the bloom of the elephant garlic bulb. I had heard that it was a lot like an onion flower except purple, and that is in fact the case. So the two elephant garlics that I allowed to flower, I think I'm gonna leave those in the ground today, but the rest of these are gonna come out. This is actually one that I harvested a couple weeks ago and then shoved back in the ground to see if it would do anything else. I don't think that it did. Now I did run my sprinklers today, which I don't like to do before I harvest root vegetables. I feel like the skins and things are a little bit weaker and prone to breaking, which may introduce things I don't want into the bulb, but it's okay. I've really had to run the sprinklers a couple times a week for around 3 hours at a time because we probably haven't gotten rain in about 2.5 weeks, which is kind of crazy. We had a really wet spring until we didn't. And this one's hard to get out. It wasn't even that big, my goodness. So this one actually kind of seems like it's a mono bulb, and I've heard of these, I just haven't seen them before. So usually with elephant garlic, you will get garlic bulbs that have 4 to 6, sometimes 8 cloves, but you can also get a mono bulb, which is essentially what it sounds like. A bulb that is of 1 clove. It's like one solid piece. Very interesting. Now it does have these little protrusions coming out the side. These are called corms, and they're very, very common with elephant garlic, and you can plant these corms and get more elephant garlic. This one is not a mono bulb. This one actually has quite a few really good sized cloves on it and quite a few corms. See them right here? Isn't that cool? Inevitably, some of the little corms end up being left in the bed, and they'll probably come back as volunteers next year. So maybe I'll just leave those right there. I really enjoy a nice volunteer in the garden, and garlic as a volunteer is really not a bad thing. You can kind of have it sprinkled throughout your garden, and it provides a certain measure of pest protection because bugs and mice and things like that, they don't really like garlic. There we go. It's another mono bulb. It's like an onion. That's cool. So these guys are still pretty juicy and firm in the neck, and so I just ran a little bit of an experiment there. Can I haul these guys out of the ground by the neck? And it seems like I can, so I think I'm gonna harvest them that way the rest of the bed. That is also a huge one. I have seriously outgrown my little harvest basket here, so I think I need to put these in the tub in order to get them over to my little curing rack underneath the carport. There, that's better. So this elephant garlic harvest was actually 2 seasons in the making. I had found, I think it was 4, maybe it was less than that, elephant garlic bulbs at our local Amish store. And the first season that I grew them just to get seed garlic. I just wanted to grow the bulbs in order to plant them again the next year. And that next year was last year, because I planted these, I think in the fall time. It might have been over winter. And then here we have the harvest that we're actually going to consume. So from what I hear, I haven't tasted elephant garlic yet. Elephant garlic is a lot less kind of hot and peppery. It still has that really great garlicky flavor, but it also really resembles an onion. I'm really excited to now have basically endless amounts of elephant garlic at my disposal. These guys can be really hard to find as seed garlic, so if you can find some, snatch it up. I see all these little corms that are in my bucket here. Plenty of these got left in the soil. And that actually happened to me last year too, or the first season that I was growing elephant garlic, and by golly, if it didn't come back in the exact same spot that I harvested it last year. So let's collect that as well. So it's a little bit hidden by our fronting asparagus and this cilantro that's gone to flower, but right here is where I had planted elephant garlic last year, and as you can see, we've got it again. And I didn't plant any of this with big bulbs. This is just from corms. From what I understand, the corm elephant garlic only grows monobulbs. And I'm not really sure if I plant the monobulbs, what those will do. I'll have to experiment with that next year. It feels like a monobulb in here. Whoops, of course I broke it off, hold on. Monobulb. Yep, monobulb for sure, with some corms. I swear, we're probably never going to be without elephant garlic, whether we like it or not. I don't know if that thunder has been coming up on camera, but I didn't think we had a chance of rain today. However, there is a storm looming, so. So this little 1 foot by 2 foot section that really just had leftover corms in it, was not intentionally planted, yielded all of this awesome food. So I have no idea if you plant monobulbs from elephant garlic, if it turns into a clove with more, or a bulb with more cloves in it. If you do happen to know, please let us know in the comments. I'm not gonna get to know myself officially until next season. We haven't talked about our rain catchment system too much on the channel, but we put one of these in over the winter, and honestly all winter long and really all spring long, we really haven't been this low. There's still about 190-ish, 185-ish gallons in here, and so it's not too bad. This is up to the tippy top. It fits 300 gallons, but in 2.5 weeks we've used quite a lot. And I actually don't use this to water the garden right now. I do have a submersible pump that I can put in here in order to water the garden. I just haven't made it that far yet. But I really love this thing, and I do hope that that storm makes it over here and fills this up a little bit. But not until we're done with the garden tour. There's still so many things to see. Another thing I haven't really showed you or talked much about at all is this lovely rose that I bought. So I know all you rose people are going to wonder what this is. All I know is that it smells good. It's a secret tea rose. And it just smells lovely. It's my first official rose. Put it in probably about a month ago, and it's actually doubled in size. These things grow really fast. So just behind the rose bush, ooh, holy moly, what is that? There are some bugs that you just want to squish because you know that some bugs aren't really good for the garden, but I don't know what that is. So I guess I'm gonna leave it alone. But those are the sunflowers, and these sunflowers I actually saved, or the seed for them I saved from sunflowers that I grew probably 2 years ago, and these were like a reddish variety, and they were multi-headed. And I can see that these plants are also multi-headed, which I guess I could have expected. So see, there will be a head coming out of the center here. You can see something starting down in there, but also in the leaf nodes of each plant is a brand new little flower stalk here. And so there's going to be flowers out of the leaf nodes as well. Check this out. This, I know what these are. These are aphids. And aphids are no good. So this is actually my milkweed plant. I've had this growing here for about 3 years. And what these little guys are gonna do is they're gonna suck the sap out of this plant, which is really gonna hurt it. you can use a hose and spray off aphids, and they generally can't make it back to the plant that they were taking over, but I have some diatomaceous earth and I'm just gonna sprinkle that on. Aphids actually come in several colors. You'll see them most of the time underneath the leaves of the plant, and they are basically all the same kind of pear shape. As far as I know, no matter the color, they're never good. You can put diatomaceous earth in like a sock and kind of puff the plant, but that's my method and it works. So I was trying to come over and show you guys all of the immature blackberries. Look at them on here. These blackberry canes we put in, I think 2 years ago, and they have rightly taken over, which is fine. And this is the first year that we're really going to get a decent crop of blackberries. Fingers crossed the birds leave them alone. If they don't, I do have some bird netting. It could get kind of interesting trying to drape it up over here, but we'll do what we can. Down in here, our volunteer chamomile is doing very well. Actually, I was due to harvest the chamomile today and I didn't. I've been harvesting just about every 2 or 3 days off of this chamomile plant that I didn't plant intentionally. There's actually quite a few plants over here. And I've been freeze drying the chamomile and it's coming out really well. Just this little patch of chamomile down here is probably going to give us enough chamomile for chamomile tea for probably 2 years. Out behind the chamomile here, you can see that our peas are definitely dying back. Even some of the pods that are not full of peas are starting to kind of shrivel up, so I don't think these plants have very much longer, which is absolutely okay. I do have a couple vining gourds that are going to take over this trellis here. So this is the arch trellis that actually leads into the garden, and I have birdhouse gourds. There's one here, and I have 2 loofah gourds down here, and they are finally starting to reach out towards the trellis. This is a loofah gourd down here, and it's starting to make its way to where it knows it's going to grow up and over. This is my first year growing the birdhouse gourd and a loofah gourd, and to say that I'm excited is a serious understatement. The other side of the trellis, we do have some more peas. This particular plant looks actually better than the other side. But see, here's the birdhouse gourd ready and raring to take over this side. So our corn plants are getting really tall. There's a really common saying, and I don't know if it's necessarily for this region or not, but your corn plants in theory should be knee-high by the 4th of July, and these guys are way higher than knee-high. And I honestly think that the farmers around here want to be eating corn by the 4th of July. That may depend on the variety. I don't think that we're going to be harvesting corn in a month here, but it should be starting to get its ears probably around then. This is peaches and cream corn right here, and I did just plant a bantam sweet corn where we harvested the garlic out of last week. You can kind of tell where I poked some seed in the ground, and that is where we just harvested the elephant garlic, and I'll be putting some corn in there as well. This cabbage actually comes with a little surprise. I did not know that this one has 2 heads as well. So that makes about half of the cabbages that I grew in the garden this year grew 2 heads. I've never seen that before until this year. See, here's a little baby head. And there's the big one. So 2 heads, 1 plant. One of them is clearly bigger. Actually, earlier in the season, we did have 2 of our cabbage plants for whatever reason, decide to bolt and go to seed. So bolting just means that the plant is flowering, and it flowers in order to get pollinated and put on seed. And this plant did that quite a while ago. These seeds are not quite ready to harvest. I can tell that they're getting there. The seed pods start out a really nice bright green, a lot like the color of the cabbage heads themselves, but then as the seeds inside start to mature, they start to yellow like this, and then eventually they're going to be dry and brown, and that's when I'm going to harvest them. I can kind of tell looking through the little pod here that some of the seeds are starting to be ripe, which is awesome. But see, they're not quite ready. We don't want green seed. What we want is black seed. So we need to wait for these pods to turn fully brown and dry out, and then I can have an infinite amount of cabbage. Ad infinitum. This is a ton of seed. I am pretty eager to harvest them though, because I think they're starting to shade out, or they've been shading out. Some of the tomatoes that I've had back here, you can see that the tomatoes on this side are a lot bigger and a lot more full. And these guys over here, some of them are quite small. Now this may be due to variety, but I'm gonna guess, especially with something like that compared to, you know, something like this is probably a lack of light. There is a chance too that there could be a lack of nutrition in this bed, because as I've mentioned in previous videos, cabbages are very heavy feeders, and so are tomatoes. So I may need to put a little bit of fertilizer down. I have noticed though that we are starting to get some tomato blooms, which is amazing. That one here has a tiny little fruit. Actually, over here in my kids' garden, the tomatoes that they planted were tomatoes that were volunteered from plants that they had fed, or tomatoes that they had fed to the chickens last year, and they have some very well developed fruit. Check that out, isn't that beautiful? I'm pretty sure that this is a Tigerella tomato. Now, because all of these tomatoes are volunteers, we actually don't know what these are. They could be hybrid varieties from two plants that crossed last year, or they could be coming back as heirloom varieties like that Tigerella. And I'm actually quite surprised that I think I'm noticing at least 4 different varieties out of these 8 plants. I would have assumed that maybe they picked up plants that were all in the same cluster that could have been from the same fallen fruit, but it seems like the chickens mixed up the seed really well, because there's quite a variety here. This plant on the end here is our Tigerella, and then right next to it is something entirely different. This is not a Tigerella. This kind of looks to me like it's probably a Belgian giant, but next door to that looks like another Tigerella. And another Tigerella. And whatever this plant is here is lovely, heavily fluted. That's what those amazing little dips and ribs in the tomato are called. It's called fluting. And I know that the Belgian giant that I love to grow, it has some fluting, but these seem excessively fluted, and I have no idea where that came from. Check that out. Lots of lovely little flutes. This one here appears to be some kind of purple cherry variety. This looks a lot like blue cream berries. And then on the end here, it looks like there's another kind of striped variety. This isn't exactly like Tigerella. I think this is a strawberry tomato. And last year, I didn't grow very many Tigerellas or strawberry tomatoes, so it's kind of amazing to see them here this year in a volunteer garden. So we're still hanging out here in the kids' garden. This is a chicken tractor that we have grown many a meat chicken in, and it lives here in the kids' garden now as kind of one of their forts. There's actually 4 different cucumber plants in here, and as you just saw, we're starting to get some flowers. So this is really cool. There, I found the tag, the straight 8 type, a favorite slicing cucumber of high quality and even deep green color, matures in 50 to 75 days. I've spent some time trying to guide the plant out so it can grow upward, and so far so good. I think that's going to be pretty magical and not very long. I also noticed that their watermelons are doing very well. Now the flowers are, oopsie, flowers are closed up now. These are male flowers. I don't think I've noticed any fruiting flowers quite yet. but I've mentioned it in a prior video. Melons are a lot like squash. They're actually Cucurbita family, and they'll produce male flowers probably a week or two in advance of the female flower. So won't be long now and we'll have baby melons on there. So we're gonna make our way to the greenhouse and the lane, but not before we get an update on this elderberry tree. I wish you guys had smell-o-vision. I don't even have to put my face up to a bloom this week because it's just, there's so many of them. You can smell it just by standing next to it. Ooh, look what I see. So I don't know if this web here is a good thing or a bad thing. There's babies of some sort inside. I don't know if they're moths or butterflies, but we'll keep an eye on that. Ooh, a thunderstorm might be coming. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on in the asparagus bed right now because the asparagus fronds are doing what they do, but we're still getting quite a lot of asparagus. Looks like there's a little bit of rain dumping out of that cloud right there, so we're gonna make our way to the greenhouse just in case that comes here. I hope it does. I feel like my pastures really need it. The lane here has been doing very well because we've got this drip irrigation. The plants are poking up above the cups this week. They're growing actually a lot faster than I expected. So this 100-foot lane here is technically a first garden space. Now, our whole property used to be tobacco farmland, so it's been tilled and worked in the past, but it's been well over a decade. And so usually your first year in a garden space, your soil's not going to be the best. It takes at least 3 years of hard work to really build up good soil and get really excellent, healthy plants out of it. So I do have somewhat high hopes for this space, but my expectations are low, if that makes any sense, because literally all I did was put these plants inside essentially straight clay, and so we're gonna see what happens. Over the years though, this space should be pretty epic. The plants are doing real well. Since last week, things have changed a tiny bit here in the greenhouse. I did manage to get the very last row that needed cleaning out relatively cleaned out. I haven't planted much in that space. I threw a couple scallop squash. I'll show you what those are. So these guys right here are super healthy looking. Look at that. I've actually been very pleasantly surprised that these squash are doing so well in this space because this greenhouse gets really hot. Isn't that gorgeous? It's adorable. I am noticing that the pollination is not very good in here, which can happen in a greenhouse setting. So I've been coming through with my little paintbrush and hand pollinating. Essentially what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll find a male flower and get the pollen off of that flower. Now this flower is gone by the wayside, but see, there's a little bit of pollen on there. And then I'll find a female flower, and you can see the little immature fruit at the base of the flower, and then in theory this would be open. You would just tickle the little insides of that flower and it's pollinated. So this here is a fruit that I actually pollinated a couple days ago. This looks really good. It's nice and firm and it's growing well. Here's another one that looks good. This one looks good down here. But see this one? This one doesn't look as good. To me, this is a surefire sign of a pollination issue. And I'm just gonna take this off of the plant. And I'm sure you guys didn't miss this big guy in here. This is a delicata that is ready to harvest. Isn't that awesome? So I've grown delicata squash in the past, but I think it was a variety called Honey Boat that was different colored. It actually had green stripes and stuff. This is kind of a plain cream color, but I'm sure it's just as delicious. Delicata squash is a thin-walled variety that keeps a little bit longer than, say, a zucchini, but doesn't keep as long as a typical winter squash like a butternut. So the skin is thick enough to last a little while, but it's also thin enough to where you don't really have to peel it in order to eat it, and it sautés up really nice. Kind of tastes like a sweet potato. Some of these larger looking beans are beans that I planted before our estimated last frost date. These are lima beans, and I've seen flowers. There's a baby bean. I feel like there should be some that are a little bit bigger in here somewhere. The beans are not having pollination issues in here because beans are self-fertile for the most part, as far as I know. All they really need is a gentle breeze to kind of shake that pollen down, and they can fertilize their own flowers, essentially. So a lot of nightshades are the same way. I know tomatoes are the same way, and so are peppers. So last year we grew a ton of tomatoes and peppers in here, and I did go along and kind of shake the plants if I felt like maybe they weren't getting enough of a breeze in here, and boy did we have a ton of fruit. So the beans are gonna do absolutely great in here, but I'll have to hand pollinate the squash, which I'm absolutely fine with. I'll probably have to come in here and do a little bit of trimming back these leaves just to allow for a little bit more airflow. Trimming back some of the leaves too should allow for some of the pollinators that can and do come in the greenhouse to be able to see those blooms and get to them. Well, it looks like our rainstorm passed us by without giving us any sprinkles. I guess it's gonna have to be okay. Anywho, guys, thank you so much for joining me today in the garden. It is getting super, super hot. My camera died 3 times in the making of this video, but the garden loves the heat, so it's only gonna get better.